The situation with Julian Assange is that his fundamental common law rights are being disregarded in the English courts. You've got to start off with one simple statement, and then you can amplify it until the cows come home. But you've got to come back to the central core of trial by jury. It's our inalienable right. That means you cannot give it away, it cannot be taken away. It's inalienable right to trial by jury.
Magna Carta.
Magna Carta, a beautiful monument down in Canberra, says so, and people disregard it. And that monument in Canberra is fabulous because it tells the true story. It's got these beautiful murals and it's got the plaques around, and it says very simply that Magna Carta is now seen as a traditional mandate for trial by jury. It'd be justice for all, accountable government, and no arbitrary imprisonment. In other words, you cannot have mandatory sentencing. It's all got to be done by a jury. And when you go to any court whatsoever, it doesn't matter if it's a magistrate's court or the Supreme Court or the family court, you've got to have a jury. The only way...
Any action.
Anything at all. The only way a court can proceed summarily without a jury is by you signing a memorandum of consent.
Right.
If you don't sign that memorandum of consent,
you're entitled to a jury.
You've got to. The court's got no jurisdiction.
Right.
All those awards, doings, and proceedings are not to be drawn into consequence or example. They are to be held for naught. This is our law.
It's a travesty of justice what's happening.
But people don't know the history. And the history of our right to trial by jury is fundamental to common law, to justice for our people. See, the one who's kicked it all off was Alfred the Great. And he was 400 years before.
Right.
He was the best king they've ever had. Because he said, no, we've got to have the community responsible for themselves. So he set up all the county courts with juries. He's the one who put it in. So all Magna Carta was revive it, and they guaranteed. They didn't create trial by jury. They guaranteed the right to trial by jury forever. Not just on selected cases, but forever. And so this is why Julian Assange is denied his fundamental rights. And so if he had decent lawyers, they would say to Julian, hey, we've got to get this before the people. This is a democracy where people have the say. We've got to have trial by jury as you're entitled to. And if they deny that, then we'll challenge the jurisdiction of the court. And that's a legal procedure, challenging the jurisdiction of the court, where a jury decided you got the right to have trial by jury. It's checkmate. And these evil judges know that. And in fact, we've got a Bill of Rights that says that we've got evil councillors, judges and ministers endeavouring to subvert and extirpate the laws and liberties of the realm. In other words, they knew back in the 17th century. It's cyclic. All these things happen when people fall asleep because they are not taught the fundamentals of our Constitution. Our Constitution is a body of principles, laws and customs that govern a country. If England hasn't got a written constitution, but it's got a constitution based upon Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, Act of Settlement. All these things go together to make up their constitution. You've got a constitution, it's your body, how your body works. So the Constitution of Australia is common law, democracy, means trial by jury, in any action. Any action at all. So that's why the trial that's going on with Julian Assange is a sham. It's a kangaroo court. And he's got to blow the whistle. He's been blowing the whistle on the CIA. Blow the whistle on the corruption of the courts. Blow the whistle. Don't bring this travesty to a stop. This woman, whoever she is, she's got no jurisdiction unless Julian Assange gives his consent. And if he hasn't got the right of consent, then he is a slave. And slavery has been abolished 200 years ago. So what's happening to Julian Assange is symptomatic of our whole general ignorance of our own heritage. Get into it.
So why do you think his lawyers?
Because they're all part of a corrupt elite. The lawyers, whether you call them Freemasons or whatever, I don't give a stuff, you know. They're bad people. They want power for themselves. So the reason judges don't like juries is because it takes the power away from them. They're megalomaniacs. Okay?
I have a hard time believing it.
What happens, even now, the Americans do trial by jury better than us because they have a trial by jury and the jury brings in a verdict and then the jury brings in the judgment, the sentencing. They impose the sentence. What happens here, the jury come in and say, oh, this bloke's guilty, and the judge says, okay, get lost, I will give the judgment. He's got no jurisdiction. They're sickos. Anyway, Julian Assange will only get freedom by common law, by common sense, with ordinary people. He will not get it while ever he's in the mire of all the corruption and the skullduggery that's going on. And the lawyers and the judges are up to their necks in it. They don't want to lose power. But what they're doing is corrupt and sinister. Julian Assange has got to have his day in court, and that means a proper court, a common law court.
But this is just an agreement between the US and the UK.
He's on trial. Magna Carta.
But they say he's not on trial. He's on. It's a hearing.
No, they're deciding whether to
extradite him.
To exile. In fact, Magna Carta says very simply, no free man shall be taken indeed in prison, or outlawed or exiled, right, or dispossessed, or destroyed in any way, unless by the lawful judgment of his equals, which is the law of the land. So he's on trial. They're testing us, testing out whether he will be exiled or extradited. Okay, but that's his freedom. So Magna Carta is the great charter of liberties, freedom.
Yeah.
He's been denied his fundamental rights and his fundamental freedoms because of his lawyers not being honest and forthright and defending him. They're not defending him. They're putting him right into the mess. Okay? And the only way of getting him out of the mess is getting the message through to Julian himself to say, come on, Julian, read Magna Carta, read what it means, read what Winston Churchill describes it, read how Thomas Edison describes it. It's all in our history. We have the right to defend ourselves in a proper court, a court of record, with a trial by jury, by his equals. Full stop.
Fight for just affairs in Sydney, Town Hall stairs. Here to make a stand. We are all a stand. Making truth expand. We are all a stand. Here to say what's right. Here to end the strife.
Grab everything. No, up there. I think it's the only one.
Total travesty of justice happening as we speak. Julian Assange's extradition hearing is on right now. All rise. Order in the court.
Order!
I'm Judge Berater.
Judge Berater.
We're all here at the Old Bailey in the UK to put on a display for public consumption.
Oh, yes.
It is important for my friends who are above the law to give the distinct impression that the Australian so-called journalist, Mr. Julian Assange, is being afforded a fair extradition hearing. As you will be aware, Mr. Assange has upset a lot of very important people by reporting the truth about them. It's not merely that he's reported the truth, it's that he's published a lot of documents proving corruption to be endemic. His radically truthful journalistic activities have caused many of our high-placed friends great embarrassment and concern. Those of us who consider ourselves above the law wish to make it absolutely crystal clear the sort of journalism Mr. Assange has been engaged in will not be permitted to continue any further.
We must stop this kind of journalism.
Under any circumstances. Please note that we consider the publishing of documents that reveal crimes against humanity as an extremely serious and dangerous transgression. Mr. Assange, therefore detained on remand under inhumane conditions in Belmarsh maximum security prison, is for the safety of all the important people who are indeed worthy of remaining above the law. Each day before appearing in court, Mr. Assange will be strip searched and x-rayed and then transported for 90 minutes from Her Majesty's prison Belmarsh to here in cramped conditions. His fiancée will agree, will feel like being inside a vertical coffin. You will notice at the rear of the courtroom, Mr. Assange is confined within a military-grade bulletproof glass cage, kindly donated to the court by our friends at the Military Industrial Complex. The see-through nature of the bulletproof glass will permit him to see what's going on in the courtroom. The sound-baffling properties of the glass will mean he will be required to speak very loudly and make ridiculously exaggerated gestures to communicate with his lawyers, who will be facing away from him. This glass box will be an inconvenience for Mr. Assange, but it will protect the rest of the court from this highly dangerous journalist. We have no need for Mr. Assange's presence in this court because, as I have stated previously, the outcome of this hearing is already sealed. The only reason he is present is so we can suggest to the media that we are being extremely fair to him. A feature of this hearing will be frequent interruptions and delays. This will bring great frustration for his lawyers, who, I understand, wish to interview a large number of expert witnesses. Every obstacle it is in my power to manipulate will be used to use up time or otherwise prevent all of these witnesses to have their say in this court. It is also going to be made extremely difficult for the general public to get a real idea of the proceedings due to limited access for the public and press. It is, however, vital that the prosecution has as much time as they need for idle speculation. Truth is most certainly a serious crime. Before we go any further, I will ask Mr. Assange one simple question to give him an opportunity to redeem himself before this court. Mr. Assange, do you still believe in truthfully informing the public?
Get on the mic. Get right on the mic.
He doesn't seem to be able to hear you, my lord.
Does he look frustrated?
Yes, my lord.
Thank you, Russia. You are my eyes and ears. Mr. Assange, do you persist in your misguided belief that you have a moral duty to truthfully inform the public on matters that concern them?
Yes.
It's not misguided. Get on the
Well, there's no helping some people. Mr. Assange is clearly unrepentant. Even after all the media smearings and years of arbitrary confinement. Now, I understand that the defence wishes to hear from Khaled Al-Masri, an innocent victim of extraordinary rendition and torture at the hands of the United States, as revealed in the documents published by Mr. Assange on his WikiLeaks website and later used in a German court. This is not relevant to the questions before me.
This goes to the question of whether WikiLeaks has performed a necessary act to prevent criminality, my lady, and enable justice, my lady.
My Lord, it is unacceptable that the US government that any allegations about torture should be made.
I will not permit the testimony of a torture victim to be censored by this court.
Mr. Assange, if there are any further outbursts like this from you, I will have no option but to have you removed from the court and have this hearing held in your absence. Mr. Khaled Al-Masri will not appear, but the gist of his evidence may be read out.
Thank you, my lady. Khaled Al-Masri, of Lebanese origin, came to Germany in 1989 and he was a German citizen. On the 1st of January 2004, after a holiday in Skopje, he had been removed from a coach in the Macedonian border. He had been held incommunicado, my lady, by Macedonian officials, ill-treated and beaten. On the 23rd of July, he had been taken to Skopje airport and handed over to CIA operatives. They had beaten, shackled, hooded, and, my lady, sodomized him. His clothes had been ripped off. He had been dressed in a diaper, shackled to the floor of an aircraft in a cruciform position, and rendered unconscious by an anesthetic injection. He awoke, my lady, in what he eventually learned was Afghanistan. He was held incommunicado again in a bare concrete shell with a bucket for a toilet. He was held for 6 months and interrogated throughout this period. My lady, there's many details of torture that you don't want to hear from me, and I accept you don't want to allow me to tell you. However, in June, he was flown to Albania, driven blindfolded up a remote mountain road and dumped there. When he eventually got back to Germany, my lady, his home was deserted and his wife and children had left. When Mr. Al-Masri made this story public, he was subject to vicious attacks, the same as Julian Assange. Attacks on his character and his credibility, and it was claimed he was inventing this torture. He believes the government sought to silence him. He sought a local lawyer and persisted, eventually getting in touch with Mr. Goetz of Public TV, who proved his story to be true. He traced the CIA agents involved to North Carolina and interviewed them. As a result, Munich state prosecutors released arrest warrants for the CIA kidnappers, but they were never executed. When WikiLeaks issued the cables, the pressure that had been brought on the German government not to prosecute them became plain. We therefore know, my lady, that the US blocked judicial investigation of a crime. The European Court of Human Rights had explicitly relied on the WikiLeaks cables for part of its judgment in this case. The Grand Chamber confirmed that Mr. Al-Masri had been beaten, hooded, shackled, and sodomized. There has been no accountability in the USA, my lady. The CIA Inspector General has declined to take action over the case. The judgment of the European Human Rights Court and supporting documentation has been sent to the office of the US Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, precisely the same office that is now attempting to extradite Mr. Assange. And that office has declined to prosecute the CIA officers concerned. My lady, a complaint has been made to the International Criminal Court, including this judgment and the WikiLeaks material. In March 2020, the International Criminal Court announced that it was opening an investigation. In response, the US Secretary of State, Mr. Pompeo, had declared any non-US citizen who cooperated with that International Criminal Court investigation, including officers of the International Criminal Court, they would be subject to financial and other sanctions. Finally, my lady, Mr. Al-Masri testifies that the WikiLeaks publications have been essential to him in gaining acceptance of the truth of the crime committed against him and of the cover-up.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. I find Mr. Al-Masri's statement to be most moving. However, we should not allow ourselves to be overcome by our emotions. The interests of the military-industrial complex must remain of paramount importance for us all. We can't let these inconvenient truths get in the way of arms consumption, now can we? The court will now adjourn so that I may recover my composure and continue with this farcical hearing with more appropriate emotions.
All rise.
The court is in recess.
Only one decision! No extradition! Inmate! Julian Assange! Inmate! Julian Assange! Free! Julian Assange! Julian Assange! Julian Assange! 31 decision! No extradition! 31 decision! No extradition! 31 decision! No extradition!
decision!
No extradition!
There is only one decision!
No extradition!
There is only one decision!
No extradition!
There is only one decision!
No extradition!
So come on, folks. Get your phones out of your pocket and Google free Julian Assange petition and put your name along with over 500,000 others on that petition and put some pressure on our politicians that are leading us into these illegal wars that are murdering innocent civilians, creating tens of millions of refugees worldwide. This must end. We can't go into another one of these wars that serve only the plutocracy. They are it's a handful of people that are making money out of these wars, and the rest of us pay the price. So come and join us, folks. Pull your phone out of your pocket, Google free Julian Assange petition, and sign Philip Adams' petition with over 500,000 people. And when you get home, get your family, your friends, your loved ones, get them all to sign it, and get them to get their friends to sign it, and let's build this petition into the millions and really make a statement here, folks. Thank you.
So hello everyone, we are inviting you to come over and sign a letter to Minister Marise Payne calling on the government to take effective action to free Julian Assange. And the letter says the following: Dear Minister, I call on you as an Australian citizen and resident to urgently intervene on behalf of Mr. Julian Assange. Julian Assange is an Australian citizen who is actively being tortured in the United Kingdom at the behest of the United States for a court hearing that can easily be referred to as an extraordinary rendition. His home government of Australia, here, this government, despite the courage of a few parliamentarians who are members of the Bring Julian Assange Home parliamentarian group, the majority have remained silent and inert, and Julian's human rights are openly being violated. Mr. Assange is an acclaimed publisher, a father, and an Australian citizen. The evidence presented by the defence in the ongoing trial in the UK clearly indicates that this is a political trial and a vendetta against Mr. Assange by the US government. The Australian government has a legal and moral obligation to actively lobby the UK government to protect Mr. Assange's life, particularly as hundreds, if not thousands, of Australian and international legal scholars, parliamentarians, doctors, journalists, community organizations, human rights organizations, former heads of states, Amnesty International, and many others have requested you, Minister, publicly to actively intervene via various letters and public releases. They have requested and told you that this extradition violates international law and is deeply flawed. We here present, Minister Payne, and ask you as the representative of our government to make immediate and effective representations on Mr. Assange's behalf so that he is released immediately.
Hear, hear, bravo!
Free Julian Assange!